I'm anticipating going over time, so I'm going to just jump straight in. It's been quite some time since I've done an update, and I suppose overall the time frame has been far from what I've expected. But it has been extremely necessary, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. Just what I've done and what I've tried to do, and I suppose overall what I've needed to do because of the nature of EDS in my case. So before I begin, I just want to thank you for still being here and being curious about how I'm doing. Your well wishes do reach me, and I very much value and appreciate them. EDS is complex, and I've been trying to condense it down so that it sounds a little bit more digestible. But because I've had a lot of misunderstanding, I just want to say that there is a lot more to this story than I can fit in. So this is an overview, but I'm hoping it brings some clarity to the time frame. And so I'm not just rambling into the camera. I've put up a digital art piece in the background. It's a time lapse, and it's pretty rough, but I thought it might be something fun to look at while I'm speaking. So the central idea I've been doing in the last couple of years is mitigation, and I can't stress just how important this has been. It's the difference between waiting for more joints to inevitably reach a point of needing surgical intervention and preventing those joints from actually getting there in the first place. And surgery doesn't always have good results in EDS. In fact, it's a big issue with EDS patients. So making sure that I didn't get to that point was very necessary. And my long-term approach to my condition has been about prevention, because I've always known that I am structurally quite fragile. It's not always obvious which joints will worsen and which can be maintained, so it's a process of observing my body over time. Now, the word hypermobility is often used to describe EDS, but I don't think it actually captures what's happening, at least not in my case and in many others. So I think the better way to describe it is that I live with structural instability across my joints at all times, and that instability exists in varying degrees. So some of my joints I can manage, and then there's some are a little more worse, and then some are severe. And the main thing that slows all of this down is muscle. So muscle acts as an external support. It stabilizes and is compensating for the weak connective tissue, particularly the ligaments. But it doesn't cure instability. It does have a huge effect in slowing down the trajectory, reducing injuries, and even maintaining a good quality life. So alongside this, what's extremely important is that I retrain my movements and proprioception. So essentially teaching my body where it should be positioned in space. In EDS, the proprioception is pretty poor, so it can be easy to overextend joints without realizing it. And over time, that can create a lot of strain and increase the instability. Again, that's in particular to my case. So learning where my joints should stop and building muscle around those positions has been key for me to maintain the stability over time. But it's not a quick process. Retraining movement, especially when you don't have a clear blueprint, is difficult and it takes time. You're often witnessing injuries before you can even get a handle on them. And of course, muscle has to be maintained to actually keep these effects. So going into my diagnosis in Barcelona, I had built up a lot of muscle for stabilization, but things were changing quickly and my ability to exercise was declining. So I didn't fully understand where the symptoms were coming from. They were coming from every angle, but they were unpredictable. So it very quickly started to feel impossible to maintain muscle. And not long after that, I began to feel structural pain I hadn't experienced in years. So I was panicking. And the question became, how do I maintain muscle in such a narrow space when everything I do has a cost? And at the same time, I was gathering information, getting second opinions, and I was looking into treatments like stem cell and prolotherapy. So I actually had asked the neurosurgeon in Barcelona what I should do about exercise. And I think his answer was really something that captures the situation I was in. He said he couldn't tell me to exercise, but he also couldn't tell me not to exercise. And that's really the rock and the hard place that I am in. On one side, there's EDS, and on the other side, there's neck instability. And I think it's a fair question to ask, why not address the most serious issue first, the neck? And yes, the neck is extremely serious, but the other question is to ask, how fragile can an EDS person become? And whether or not that surgery is going to have consequences also. And one of the biggest motivators for me also to mitigate was what had happened with my neck and jaw. So as my neck had worsened before diagnosis, even small movements at the vertebral level would trigger quite violent spasms. And those spasms were pulling my jaw out of the joint. And over time, that caused my jaw to deteriorate. So this showed me very clearly how one unstable joint can affect another to the point where you lose control of them. Also, the problem is that with surgery in EDS, we're often advised to be very cautious with expectations because outcomes can be very unpredictable due to the fact that the connective tissue is quite fragile. Now, people do have good outcomes, but it's still a rule to keep those expectations managed. And one of the consistent themes I was hearing from surgeons was the possibility of needing further surgeries eventually, especially in my spine. But at the same time, through all of this, my left hip would come to actually be on a trajectory towards dislocation because it was following the same pattern I had seen in my jaw. The subluxations were becoming more frequent and it was clearly moving to that dislocation point. Now, I have other joints that sublux, but I wouldn't categorize them on a trajectory towards dislocation. But through the work that I was actually doing, I was able to pull it back from that trajectory and regain some stability. So if there was any way to improve things, I was going to find it. And from that point on, everything I did was under observation and experimentation. So I began to focus on symptoms at a practical level, the day-to-day movement. So what actions were creating symptoms or just symptoms coming naturally because of the fact of that condition. And I was trying to understand warning signs of sensations where I could predict then the types of symptoms that would happen and try change that outcome. The goal was to really find the smallest safe margin to work within. So for example, take walking. If I walked and had a drop attack, let's say, I would ask, why did that happen? And was it the movement itself, or was it the time under tension? Was it the position of the neck? Or was it just something I couldn't negotiate at all? It was just part of the condition. Then the next question is to ask if walking even helps stabilization. And if I could tolerate walking enough to actually reach that stabilization. And because I couldn't, I would ask the question, well, what is the alternative I could do? Is there like some controlled squats I could do during the day? And then asking, would that even maintain muscle without pushing into danger? So I was constantly trying to understand what my body could tolerate and where the line was. I wouldn't recommend doing it this way with neck instability because the symptoms are serious and I didn't always know what was safe. And I was struggling to gain information from medicine in Ireland. But there's also a mental side to this. With the level of pain and unpredictability, it's very easy for the mind to withdraw. Fear sets in because there is a real threat. And at times I could feel myself slipping into disassociation simply because of the intensity of pain. One thing that has anchored me through all of this has been my faith in Christ. And not something as secondary, but as my foundation. Even when nothing in my circumstances suggested that I should be able to keep going, I did keep going. And I'm very grateful to my family for trusting me and for their consistency in being in this with me. So what was the turning point? At that stage, many of my symptoms were showing that the vertical instability was getting significantly worse, particularly around the odontite process causing brainstem compression. It was becoming clear from the changes in my body that things were at a dangerous level. I was sleeping fully upright with my neck brace on just to stay safe. Even a slight tilt of my head backwards into extension would trigger severe neurological symptoms, including paralysis. But if I lay on my side, there would be a shift at the cranial junction, and that would cause intense pressure and confusion. My skull would shift out of alignment, and I'd actually have to physically push it back into place. So my mother had suggested this Cusack protocol before, but I hadn't taken it. So this time I did, and I actually took it incorrectly at first. I introduced everything at once, and you're supposed to do it gradually. But within a week, I felt a level of strength that I had never experienced before. It didn't feel like muscular strength. It felt something, I suppose, deeper. It was like giving a battery pack to my connective tissue. And so that's essentially what it is targeting. It's targeting the cells. It supports things like the mitochondria, the extracellular matrix, and ATP production. So for example, I take D-ribose, which helps support the ATP, providing more energy at that cell level. So over about 6 months, the difference became very clear, but it hasn't cured my instability, and I can't stop taking it. So it's given my body a level of support, especially in endurance, that has significantly changed my situation. I think the best way I can describe it is that it's lifted the baseline, like a car jack just raising something slightly, just enough to take pressure off the critical areas, especially in my neck. So instead of being at that critical point all of the time, I now have more stability to work within. For example, I don't have to sleep upright at a 90-degree angle anymore to stay safe. I still have to be careful. If I go too far back, the symptoms are still there, particularly the paralysis being problematic. But overall, I'm more consistently stable and the cranial junction is better supported. So looking at everything as a whole, what I've done and tried to do, the change in the trajectory has been significant, particularly in terms of needing future surgeries. The future is still unknown, and I am still working on a lot of things and getting results in having stability in ways that I don't think I could have imagined having. So the mitigation has seriously changed everything in the future. And I want to thank you for being one of the foundations that has allowed me to do that. Instability on this level is extremely frightening. So having a future that I can control better is huge. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without your support. It has made more of a difference than I can fully express. Finally, there's a story about a farmer. When things go wrong, his neighbours say that's bad, and he responds, maybe. When things go well, they say that's good, and again he responds, maybe. And in many ways, this journey has felt like that. Not good in itself, but not without purpose. Because as scripture says, what was meant for evil, God can turn for good. And that's been the foundation for this, having faith and knowing that what it looks like is not the finished story. So as I say, there's still a lot I'm doing, but for the first time in a long time, the future does look bright. So thank you again, and I pray that the blessing that you've given me returns back to you.